I still remember the chill that ran down my spine the night after I swiped right on the dating app NarriMatch. Unlike other dating apps that would boast about matching you by interests or location, NarriMatch promised to pair people based on the intensity of their shared nightmares. It sounded absurd, almost like a cruel joke, but after months of restless sleep haunted by inexplicable terrors, I was desperate to find someone who understood. The app's concept was simple, yet unnerving. In the registration process, you answered a series of questions about your recurring dreams, nightmares that involved dark figures in foggy alleys, shadowed rooms with whispering walls, and endless chases through distorted landscapes. I entered details of my most persistent nightmare, a labyrinthine house where doors opened into unknown horrors, where an unseen presence loomed behind every corner. I never imagined that by exposing my private terror, I'd soon find a connection that would blur the line between dreams and reality. A few days later, I received a message from someone called Aurora. Her username felt ethereal, almost otherworldly, and her profile was just as mysterious as my own. She described her nightmares as a series of recurring memories that felt more like warnings than dreams. Intrigued and admittedly a bit terrified, I arranged to meet her in a quiet cafe on a rainy evening. The atmosphere was fitting, dim lights, raindrops tapping the windows, and an air of uncertain anticipation. When Aurora arrived, her eyes instantly conveyed a story of sleepless nights and haunted recollections. Over cups of steaming coffee, we exchanged our deepest fears, the kind that only whispered their names in the darkest hours. I mentioned the labyrinth, the endless hallways, and the sense of inevitability that clawed at me. Aurora, in turn, spoke of a recurring dream involving a crumbling mansion, a voice that called out her name in broken syllables, and a secret she could never fully explain. The more we talked, the more I began to suspect that our nightmares weren't mere figments of our subconscious. They were connected, inexplicably and hauntingly intertwined. In the days that followed, Aurora and I started spending more time together. Our conversations often drifted into discussions of ancient myths, legends of cursed places, and ghost stories passed down through generations. At first, I chalked it up to shared imagination, a mere reinforcement of our common terror. However, fragments of our nightmares began to merge. I started noticing details in my dreams I had never seen before, a cracked mirror that whispered my name, a silhouette staring from a shadowed corner. Aurora described an identical mirror in her dreams, and her voice trembled as she revealed the same chilling detail. Driven by a compulsive need to understand the origin of our shared terror, we embarked on an investigation that led us to a town on the edge of nowhere, a town reputed to have once been the epicenter of an unspeakable tragedy. There, in a crumbling mansion near a fog-laden marsh, locals whispered tales of a curse placed long ago by a scorned spirit. The mansion was said to have been built upon an ancient burial ground, a place where sorrow and vengeance had fused over centuries to create an ethereal trap for lost souls. Somehow Aurora and I had been drawn to this very location, as if our nightmares were a guide. The mansion loomed before us, its decaying silhouette a reflection of our inner fears. Armed with flashlights and a script of local lore, we ventured inside. Every creak of the floor and whisper of wind through broken windows amplified the tension. As we moved through the dust-laden corridors, small details began to echo the imagery from our nightmares. A rusted key hung on an old nail, a portrait of a sorrowful woman with eyes that seemed to follow me. The lingering scent of decay that I had always felt in my dreams was heavy in the air. It was in a narrow, spiraling staircase that we encountered the unsettling truth. The walls were inscribed with symbols that matched the patterns I often saw in the labyrinth of my nightmares. Aurora's hand trembled as she traced one of these symbols, and it was then that the ground beneath us shuddered slightly. A low, mournful sound resonated through the hall, a voice, barely audible, murmuring our names. For a moment, time ceased. Our hearts pounded in unison with that spectral utterance. I recalled a fragment of a rumor, that NarriMatch wasn't an ordinary dating app at all, but a portal, a conduit that harnessed the anguish of unresolved souls to bring kindred spirits together. Had we been merely matched by algorithms designed to measure our nightmares, or had fate orchestrated this unnerving reunion? The distinction between digital coincidence and supernatural destiny blurred as the mansion seemed to awaken around us. In a small, concealed room at the mansion's heart, we found a journal. its pages brittle with age. The diary belonged to a young woman named Cecilia, whose life had been consumed by sorrow and unrequited love. In a final entry, she described how the restless spirit of her lover, lost to fate and time, sought to reunite them through shared dreams, a ritual that bound souls across dimensions. The accounts frightened me, yet they also made an inexplicable sense. Aurora and I had been matching on the basis of nightmares, anger, sorrow, and love twisted into dark visions. But what did it mean? Were our dreams simply echoes of a centuries old tragedy, or were they a warning of another impending catastrophe? As Aurora and I continued to piece together Cecilia's tale, the atmosphere grew oppressive. The house seemed to contract with each new revelation. The edges of reality softened, and dark figures lurked in the peripheral vision of our flashlights. A persistent whisper, once an indistinct background noise, began to coalesce into clear words near our ears. Return, return. Desperate to escape the mansion and its malevolent pull, we retraced our steps. Every door creaked as though urging us to linger. Every corridor twisted unnaturally like the corridors of our nightmares. Outside, the rain had turned into a torrential downpour that blurred the line between the mansion's looming walls and the swirling gray sky. The drive back to civilization felt like a baptism in terror, each mile driving home the sense that our connection, forged in the crucible of shared nightmares, had irrevocably altered our very lives. In the days after that night, I found it impossible to shake the lingering dread. The nightmares persisted, their details more vivid and insistent. Aurora's calls became rare, as if she too was recoiling from the fallout of our discovery. Nightly, I found myself wrestling with the unsettling idea that NarriMatch was more than a dating app. It was a catalyst for forces beyond our control. I began to question whether it was our innate loneliness or a supernatural design that had driven us together to confront not only each other's demons, but those that haunted the spaces between our conscious and unconscious minds. Eventually, I deleted the app, hoping the erasure of its digital imprint would also dissolve the bond it forged between us and that dreadful past. Yet every time I closed my eyes, I was met with the unyielding labyrinth and the echo of whispered names. The experience left me with a profound mystery. The realization that the line between our nightmares and reality is unnervingly thin, and sometimes the forces that bind us in darkness might never truly let go. Now, as I write this, I cannot tell if my experience was a chance convergence of haunted souls or an elaborate design by an entity that thrives on despair and connection. In the stillness of the night, when dreams merge with waking life, I often wonder if Aurora feels it too, the persistent, unyielding pull of those shared nightmares that might one day beckon us back into the labyrinth. Until then, I live with the haunting truth that some matches are forged in darkness and some nightmares are all too real.